we all have probably memorized this psalm at some point. But I got it.
Okay.
I got it. Thank you.
I'll be your vicar.
The vicar. Yeah. Yeah, not the altar boy, but neither the vicar.
On that note,
We're on a roll today. We're on a roll. I don't know. We probably memorized it, but have we ever? Did anyone in school ever have to do sentence breakdowns?
Yeah. Like
Diagramming.
Yeah. I've seen that. I've never done it.
he had to do that. We did that. That was painful.
It's even worse when you have to do it in Greek.
Oh my.
Yes, I pray none of you ever have to endure sentence diagramming in Greek.
You did your bachelor's, didn't you?
Yeah. Yep. So, but this morning we're going to be keeping track of. It's okay. I don't need it. This was just.
You should know that one.
Paperwork. We're going to be following the he's and the I's, the personal pronouns. One of the biggest light bulbs that ever went off for me when studying the Bible, I was a little bit older than Hannah, is when I really realized when you notice who is working and who is acting in a passage. If you follow the personal pronouns, it really tells you a lot about what God is trying to convey in different passages, what he is doing. Psalm 23 is not about what the sheep does or accomplishes. Once again, it's not about the sheep. It's about the shepherd. And unfortunately, we've been brought up in a culture and society that focuses on the sheep and not the shepherd. If you guys have ever gone to the Goodles County Fair and you see the sheep, they are some really dumb and stupid animals. They are.
Yes.
And the only way they survive is in groups. But even then, if one goes off a ledge, they will follow. There's a story about a shepherd in England. He was looking for his sheep to find that they had been hopping off of a ledge because one had jumped off, and it had gotten so full at the bottom of this cliff that they were bouncing on top of each other as they landed at the bottom of the cliff. If he hadn't arrived, the rest of the flock would have willingly jumped over. It just goes to show when the Lord uses the analogy of sheep for us, that we too can be rather stupid individuals. Yeah. And I think that backs up my thesis that decisions by large groups of people is not always a good thing. Because if those sheep were willing to go over the ledge because one person did so, and the Lord makes that analogy of us, obviously we see many times, we see whether it's communism or whether it is following whatever the latest trend is, or the, in most recently, everything with COVID, we can easily become sheeple. Sheeple.
Yep, that's a good one.
Yeah.
Or when you do like the dumb decision in a video game, and never mind that.
No. Oh, I've done that more times than I can count.
Yeah, same. As long as you don't go Leroy Jenkins.
Yeah, Leroy Jenkins. Yes.
I've seen that clip.
Yes. Okay, Lee Brooks. So Christy's bringing up. There's a Bible study teacher back in where we grew up, where Chrissy grew up, is in church, and he taught Sunday school for many years. And his way of getting people back to the study was stick to the text. Let's get back to the text. But I wanted to give us a quick glimpse as to what we're going to be looking at this morning. As we look at all of Psalm 23, he makes me lie down. He leads me. He guides me. He is with me. He is the one that prepares the table. He anoints me. His goodness is what follows me, and I will dwell with him forever. Notice there, out of the 9 things that happen, only one of them is about us. It's about what God is doing for us and to us, but only at the end, the psalmist can say, I will dwell with him forever. And even then, the object is not really the sheep, is the fact that the sheep will be with the shepherd. The comfort of the sheep is found in the faithfulness of the shepherd. Once again, the comfort of the sheep is found in the faithfulness of the shepherd. Sheep don't create their own comfort. In fact, sheep, as I said earlier, because they're so dumb, will often get themselves into trouble and to die because of their stupidity. It requires the shepherd to lead them in their pen or into the grazing fields where they are safe and they are cared for. Verse 1, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. Your first fill in the blanks this morning is the Lord is my shepherd. Oh, sorry. Take one, pass it around. I didn't want to give them all out at first. That way there's papers not flying around.
Yeah, we'll do that.
So what's the first fill in the blank?
First fill in the blank is my, M-Y. Yeah, no.
I think I got those for two.
All right, just give me the.
I'm taking notes for us.
Notes are good. Notes are good. I'm taking notes all the time. I'm thankful I've got both regular notebooks, but now with the advent of computers and that, and a computer program I use called Logos is a Bible study software. And what's nice is that all of my notes that I put on there, I can access either on my computer or my phone or wherever I am, and it doesn't have to be something physical, which is nice.
If I can get fancy, you get a watch you can do it with too.
Oh my.
I've got my Mac and iPad.
It's all fancy. Miss Fancy. You wearing your Apple iWatch over here?
No, because it's not charged.
Oh, it's not charged.
It hasn't been charged since
Yeah,
we
they
moved.
do that tend to need to be charged every single day.
Yes.
And
Yes.
yeah,
Design.
Yeah,
it's problematic.
it hasn't been charged since.
Yeah.
So that's okay.
So what's interesting is much like in Genesis 1:1, in the beginning was God. Same thing in John 1:1. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Here, Psalm 23 starts off with God. The Lord is my shepherd. What's interesting, we don't quite catch it in the English. The form of the word Lord used there is Yahweh, the covenant name between God and Israel. We think when we see capital L-O-R-D that that's just a Lord in the sense of one who has power and authority, but instead this is a personal name. This is God's use and reminder to David and to all his descendants that because he has entered in a covenant with them, this is the name he uses to remind them of that covenant. I am Yahweh. I am the one who has taken you from Egypt and been there with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. I'm not just your boss, but I am now your shepherd. I shall not want. Notice there, he doesn't say I shall not need. That's another thing our culture mixes up, wants versus needs. My children want all kinds of things. But the big question is do they need it? We don't need much. Shelter, clothing, food.
Swift kick in the butt.
Well, swift kick in the rear, right?
What about water? You forgot water.
Food, water. Yeah.
Yes.
We don't need much. But what we want is everything. This does not mean that the believer receives everything he desires. That's, I think, the hard part, much like our children have to learn. They want all kinds of things and they don't always get them. And many times, because we live, I just heard a thing this week. I was at a regional chaplain conference and they brought up an interesting fact that if you have a home and have running water, you are in the top 5% of people in the world.
That's unbelievable.
It's crazy. that you then are put into this top wealthiest people in the world because of those two simple things. And it's even more if you actually own your home. If you don't just are not just renting or staying somewhere, then that puts you, I thought it said top 2 or 1% in the world. God's provision is not the satisfaction of every want, but the provision of every true need. When David says here, I shall not want, he's talking about, I shall not be lacking in the things that I need, not in all of my requests. Unfortunately, as we've talked the last several weeks, the church has created God into this cosmic vending machine, the cosmic sky daddy that gives you, what you beg and plead for.
Oh yeah, I'll have the number 2, row 13.
Yes. Unfortunately, it does not work like that. The sheep's security does not rest in what the sheep possesses, but who the shepherd is. If we think about sheep, what do they have?
Wool. Water.
Yeah,
They're
yeah.
warm.
They have
That's
no
it.
tax.
Yeah, they got wool.
taxes.
Cool sound.
No taxes. I like that one.
They
They
have
are
a
free.
shepherd.
They have the shepherd, and the shepherd provides all that they need. They can't get it themselves. They're too dumb to find water on their own.
They get drowned.
Well, that's true too. The shepherd does have to be careful how deep the water is that he leads them to. It's amazing.
Still waters.
Yeah, just still waters, not moving waters, or else the sheep would take a whitewater raft tour down the river.
All right, let's go.
Verses 2 and 3 we'll take together. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside quiet waters or still waters. He restores my soul. He guides me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Once again, notice he makes, he leads, he restores, he guides. The Lord is showing us what it is to be the good shepherd. We're going to look at it here in a little bit, but Jesus said that he is the good shepherd. That he is the one that fulfills all of these things that David is talking about for us. Because many times, like the sheep, we go after things that aren't good for us. How many times do we hear of the stories of sheep that have gotten themselves caught in the fences or the barbed wire, or caught themselves in a ditch, and they need to be rescued by the shepherd?
Have you seen those videos where they find one upside down in like a drainage ditch?
Yes,
And they get him out and then he immediately jumps in again?
yes.
We don't learn, do we?
No, we do not learn. And that's why I think the Lord using the analogy throughout the Bible of us being sheep is so accurate. But we don't think that we're sheep. We think that we're a much smarter animal than a sheep. Whatever animal you want to insert there.
Lemon shark.
Yeah, we think that we're powerful like sharks and predators. Or we think that we're powerful like lions and bears. Tigers and bears, oh my, yeah. No, the Lord instead chooses to say, you guys are dumb sheep. The shepherd does not merely keep his sheep alive, he feeds his sheep. He doesn't just keep them alive enough for whether he's collecting them for wool or for lamb chops or for mutton, but he actually cares for them. The quiet waters we see, the shepherd leads his people beside waters of peace, not whitewater rafting or deep lakes. Although it'd be interesting to find out how deep this one actually is.
It says it's unmarked. It's pretty deep.
Oh,
It's probably pretty deep. What's interesting about this, when we talk about the green pastures and the quiet waters, you notice there, a lot of the times, the shepherd has to lead them through the valley of the shadow of death in order to get to the still and quiet waters. We don't want to go through the valley of the shadow of death to get to the green pastures and the quiet waters. But it just reminds us that the believer's peace does not depend on our circumstances. If we are with the shepherd and we are following the shepherd's voice, we will eventually get to the quiet waters, the green pastures. The last phrase there, he restores my soul. Whether we want to look at that in the eternal sense, where he takes dead men and women and restores them to true life, or whether it is restoring of our soul when we're down and out, when we get depressed, when we're challenged in the midst of life, when we're struggling in the valley of the shadow of death, he restores our soul. He guides me in the paths of righteousness. The shepherd does not merely provide comfort, he provides direction. He doesn't just lead from behind the sheep, going wherever they're going to go, but instead the sheep follow him so that he can show them the right path. It reminds me of what Jesus would say later. Broad is the way and broad is the path that leads to destruction, but narrow is the way and narrow is the path that leads to life. How are we going to stay on the narrow path unless we have a shepherd to show us the way? Because if we are truly like sheep, we will wander from that path, get stuck in a ditch, jump off a cliff, drown ourselves in deep water, all the dangers that are around. It takes the shepherd, his under-shepherds, and the sheepdogs to keep the sheep moving in the right direction. The Christian life is not merely God makes me comfortable, although that's what we tend to make it. Instead, we should be saying that God makes me holy, or is making me holy. But that process isn't easy. That process hurts. Much like learning the lessons of getting caught or in trouble and the shepherd comes to save us. When we start putting things in our trophy case of faith, as we were reminded of last week, we're reminded of that this journey is, because of our own faults and our own struggles, makes it difficult. For his namesake. Once again, I really need to spend some time to dig more into it. I've got a spreadsheet I've been working on for a number of years about the times in which God says, I myself will do this. I myself will accomplish this. I am doing this for my name. I'm doing this according to my plan and purpose. Here, even in Psalm 23, David points out that it is for his name's sake. It's to bring glory to God, not for any other reason. It's not because you probably have heard that God created us because he was lonely. No, God had everything he needed in the Father, Son, and Spirit before eternity began, before they together made the plan of creation and redemption and eternity for us. That was their choice, to glorify himself, not that he was, quote unquote, lonely and needed a hobby. That's what it's presented as. Oh, God needed a hobby. He got bored, and so he created us. No, that's attributing a wrong quality or attribute to God. That's saying that God was lacking in and of himself, and we complete something that is lacking. That is not the case. And instead, if that were true, and for us to go through what we go through, would make God into a bad father. Because of our sins and our struggles and our pain. Verse 4, even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. Here's where the psalm changes. It's talked about quiet waters, talked about nice green pastures, talked about dumb sheep. But notice, this is the only part in the psalm where the personal pronouns change from he to you. This personal relationship that David has with the shepherd comes through. He doesn't just talk about an abstract he, but instead you. You is the shepherd, and you are the one that is leading me through the valley of the shadow of death. I think probably the two words that are missed the most in this entire psalm are even though. Even though you lead me through the valley of the shadow of death. As though the valley of the shadow of death doesn't exist. But maybe we could consider this a different way. Instead of saying, if I ever suffer, or if I ever struggle, instead we should see it as though even though I suffer and struggle, even though I'm walking through this life and are going through, whether you're recovering from a stroke. In fact, a customer at the store yesterday came up and was ordering some items and was apologizing because they are having a hard time talking because they had recently had a stroke. And it's like, you don't need to apologize to me. We can wait. All you need to do is just point to what you want, and we can get it if you're having a hard time communicating. There's no need to apologize for something that's happened. And yet, we often would then blame God that he wasn't there in the midst of it. Or how many times when we go through life and God brings us through the other side to something and yet to be used later when somebody else is going through the same thing. Whether it's loss of a child or loss of a family member, whether it's going through cancer treatments, or the list could go on and on. The Lord uses each and every one of those situations to bring him glory and opportunity to minister to others. A gentleman came in also this week. I think it was on Thursday. Yeah, Thursday. He came in and he was getting some food because his wife was at the hospital having treatments. And it was the same medicine treatment that Christy had gone through for a little while, interferon. He had mentioned, I'm like, I have a little bit of, not myself have experience with it, but I have a family member that's gone through that, and I'm sorry. So we actually got to talk for a little bit about his struggles. And it happened, just so happened that the Lord orchestrated it. There was nobody else around, nobody else there. It wasn't busy. I actually got to take a few minutes and talk with this gentleman and to try and bring some type of comfort. And thankfully to find out that he and his wife are believers and they're trusting in the Lord in this difficult time of going through these treatments. The shepherd does not promise that his sheep will never enter dark valleys. It's never promised health, wealth, and prosperity. It's never promised you come to Jesus and everything will be perfect. Even though many on TV and the radio and the internet say the exact opposite. Yeah. But instead, what we should be saying is, even though you guys are in those valleys, even though all of us will face death, the valley of the shadow of death. And I will have to give credit where credit is due. John Miner and I were talking about this a number of years ago. And he mentioned how he was reading that really the valley of the shadow of death is life. Our entire lives is the valley of the shadow of death. Because death is always over us. It's always looming. It's always there. It's always the shadow, like the shadow that just came over us because of the cloud. Death is always over our head. Every one out of one person dies, except for Enoch and Elijah. We always live under the the asking or wondering, when is it that the Lord will call us home? But even though we walk through the valley of the shadow of death, the shepherd promises to walk with us through it. We're not alone, because even the shepherd experienced the valley of the shadow of death himself. He's not unfamiliar with the suffering of life and knowing from day one that his whole mission was to suffer and to die. Death is not something to be afraid of because he has conquered death. I think as Christians, us of all people should be ones that are not afraid of death, because death is just the doorway to eternity. It is a transition from this life to the next. It is a transition from sin and death and suffering and pain to being with the shepherd for eternity. Christians should not be afraid to die, but instead looking forward to what happens after. But also notice there, he says, I walk through. He doesn't say he's running. Also doesn't say he's camping overnight in the valley of the shadow of death. Doesn't say he's making a stronghold or a castle in the midst of the valley of the shadow of death. Is that we walk through life to get to the other side. What is it that Israel got in trouble for? Especially the two tribes that stayed on the other side of the Jordan? Or Lot decided to pitch his tent toward Sodom. Lot decided to stay in the valley of the shadow of death. The two tribes chose to stay on the other side, not in the promised land. And they suffered for it. Instead of walking with the shepherd to where he is leading us. Whether it's the two tribes that were told, your promised land is across the river, yet you're choosing to stay here. Or Lot was given choice of the choicest land, and yet pitched his tent toward Sodom. We have to be careful where we're walking through, and that we're not camping or staying or putting up our banner that we're going to stay in the valley of the shadow of death. Whether that looks like not investing our time, energy, and resources in something that is going to pass away. I see many believers struggle with wanting the American dream. And it makes me wonder, is the American dream setting up camp in the valley of the shadow of death? Is the American dream or versions of it nothing more than putting stock into the valley of the shadow of death? Is it creating a castle and staying in one spot in that valley versus, as it said here, I walk through it? The valley is not the destination. Unlike the two tribes that stayed on the other side of the Jordan, or Lot that pitched his tent toward Sodom, that is not the destination. Our destination is where the shepherd is taking us, that we walk with him through the valley. I will fear no evil. Why? It's not as though evil doesn't exist. All we have to take is 2 seconds and turn on the TV to see that evil exists. But why is it that the sheep doesn't need to fear evil? It's not because of suffering is imaginary. It's not because death is harmless, but instead because for the shepherd is with him. David understood this well. He had killed a bear and a lion himself to protect the sheep. His sheep did not need to fear the Well, in our particular case, if it was here in America, the coyote or the mountain lion, because the shepherd is watching and guarding the sheep. The sheep do not need to fear the evil because he is with us. Jesus talks about that he who is in us is greater than he who is in the world. We have overcome because he has overcome. And yet we see Christians that struggle with that security in the shepherd, that fear the evil, that they become fearful of the evil that is around them versus trusting in the shepherd. Yes, there are those in the church that are called to prepare to defend against evil men. All it takes for evil to flourish is for good men to do nothing. The Lord does not leave us defenseless. There's a phrase that has come up in the military communities and police communities that there is such thing as a watchdog. In our case, a shepherd dog, the sheepdog. They're the ones underneath the shepherd who help to guard and to corral the sheep. But also they are there to protect the sheep, to alert the shepherd of the lions and tigers and bears, oh my. That when called for, I don't know if you guys have ever seen the videos of dogs that will protect their family when there's intruders or when there's a snake or other animals that would cause them harm.
Like that one clip of I think it was a Great Pyrenees that took down like 8 coyotes.
Yes. Yeah. Because their job is they've been bred to protect. They will very often protect even to their death, their families, the sheep that they've been put over. I view pastors are like the sheepdogs. We are not the shepherd, but the shepherd calls for pastors to help guard and to warn and to corral the sheep. The Lord also calls them under shepherds. They do not own the sheep. They only serve to help the shepherd when the sheep get numerous, or to be the sheepdog that warns of danger. The body of Christ needs all three: the shepherd, under shepherds, and sheepdogs. And not to be afraid of the sheepdogs because their calling is different. The Lord uses their valley of the shadow of death experiences to then bring safety and security to the flock. Many times churches are afraid of those that have been police officers or in the military, and yet the Lord might use those gifts, talents, and abilities for them to be the perfect sheepdog, to protect when the evil comes knocking at the door. This week, in fact, at the chaplain's conference, we saw the video from the shooting here in Michigan that was recently. Where was that at? Huh? Yeah, which one? The most recent one. Huh? No, the church school. There were some sheepdogs that were there and helped put an end to the evil that was outside. And we talked about that pretty at length, about the need for, they didn't use the term, but I'm using the term sheepdogs. The answer to the valley is not just an explanation, because we live it each day. But instead, the answer to us going through the valley of the shadow of death is the presence of God. That is why the very next thing David says that comforts him. David says that his rod and his staff, they comfort him. Now, since we're not in the culture of, sheep, although we are in the culture of having around us lots of cows, and in fact, we were driving by Pastor Chris Freeman's house the other day, I was passing by last night on my way home, and we were talking with my mom, and I was mooing back at the cows. So we do live in a somewhat ag culture and ag area, not necessarily sheep. But why is it that the rod and the staff comfort David? The rod and the staff, one is for leading and for guiding, and the other is for protection. We need both. Many in Christianity today say it's fine that the Lord has a staff to lead and to guide us, but we do not want the staff of correction. We do not want the rod that both helps him in his fight against the lions and tigers and bears, but also can be used as correction for the sheep. Reminds me of Romans chapter 8, verse 28. And we know that God causes all things to work together for good to those who love God, to those who are called according to his purpose. That includes all things. Pasholos, all things. God even works suffering according to his purpose. God works this valley of the shadow of death to his purpose. The shepherd is sovereign even in the midst of the valley. Verse 5, you prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You have anointed my head with oil, and my cup overflows. In the table in the presence of my enemies, God does not merely rescue his people privately. God prepared David a table in front of his enemies, publicly, where all could see. God didn't prepare this table for David while he is in a cave, or while he was running from Saul, but instead God publicly made him king and placed him eventually on his throne. But then David had to spend 18 years waiting, going through that valley until he sat at that table. You have anointed my head with oil. He's hearkening back to the day in which the prophet came to him, anointed him with oil, and said, you are now king over Israel. That is true, even though it would be years until he sat on his throne. Another analogy that others have brought up, both Spurgeon brings this up and others, is that the kings and queens of England, often when they assume the throne, is on the day that either the other monarch dies or abdicates the throne. And yet comes a public declaration that now they're coronated, they're crowned. But they were still king or queen well before the coronation or crowning ceremony. The same thing is true with us. The truth is that the Lord is preparing a table before us. And by the way, that table, we are celebrating each time we gather. That marriage supper of the Lamb is that table that we are waiting for. The truth is already there that the Lord is preparing the table, and we continue to celebrate it, but we're waiting to celebrate it with him. My cup overflows. The cup is not just filled to the brim, but is overflowing. Now, we could talk about that as just the abundant provision of God and talk about how he continues to, above and beyond all of our hopes and dreams, provide for us. But I describe it this way for my karate kids. During their promotion ceremony, they place the belt that they have and create it into an L on their right, the side and bottom of the cup. Their new belt is at the very bottom of the cup. And then there's an imaginary third belt that creates the other L of the cup. Then we talk about what L can mean: love, longevity. But we also talk about that as Christians, that God fills our cup to overflowing. And all the things that God gives us. The analogy I've used is that God fills our cup with water to the point that it's overflowing, so that as others enter into the room, they can't help but get wet. That God gives us His Spirit to overflowing measure, that our cup overflows. This talking about the table before us in the presence of our enemies. We could say even today that as we take of communion, we are in the midst of our enemies. There's probably those in the park today that today and every day shake their fists at God, are professed enemies of God. Yet the Lord has prepared us a table this morning in the midst of our enemies. It reminds me of the marriage supper of the Lamb. For context, there, Revelation 19, the Lord has just wiped the nations that have come against him are desolate. The carcasses of the bodies of the armies that have come against him are dead and rotting. And the vultures of the air have come in and are feasting themselves on the bodies of the dead army. And then in the midst of that, it doesn't say that it's separate, but in the midst of that, there's another table. And that's where we pick up this scene in Revelation 19. Let us rejoice and be glad and give glory to him, for the marriage supper of the Lamb has come, and his bride has made herself ready. It was given to her to clothe herself in fine linen, bright and clean, for the fine linen is the righteous acts of the saints. Then he said to me, write, blessed are those who are invited to the marriage supper of the Lamb. And he said to me, these are the true words of God. This marriage supper of the Lamb is the very supper that Jesus said that he would not take of the cup, of the last cup, until this day. That is what, each time we take of communion, we are looking forward to this event in Revelation 19. To us sitting at the table with him. Later, or earlier, Jesus gives the story of great wedding feast. And there are those that should have been there who were invited that did not come. Then he sends out servants to implore them to come, and they kill them and they murder them. Then he says to go and to implore people from the highways and the byways for everybody to come in to this supper. But then there were those that were found at the dinner table that didn't have the right apparel. They were not dressed correctly, and they were kicked out of the wedding feast. We must be careful that when we do come to the table, that we are clothed in the righteousness of Christ and not in and of our own selves. And we're not coming in our own Sunday best, but in his best. Verse 6, as we close up this morning, surely goodness and loving kindness will follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. He starts off this verse by saying, surely. There's a certainty he has about this. He's not saying maybe, not kind of, sort of, not I hope or I wish, but instead, surely. Goodness and loving kindness. These concepts in the Hebrew point to chesed. Chesed, God's loving kindness towards us. The word chesed is tied to his covenant. That here in a few moments when we take of communion together, we eat of the bread and drink of the cup that are his covenant with us. That his chesed, his loving kindness, like here with David, that David is sure that God's loving kindness is good enough. David is sure that his chesed is steadfast. Then he says that he is sure of that he will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. But who is this good shepherd? Who is it in human history that has ever said that he is the good shepherd? Jesus identifies himself as the good shepherd in John chapter 10. Your last three fill in the blanks this morning is he knows his sheep. Jesus never said all of humanity is his sheep. We have talked about this before, that we are not, quote unquote, all God's children until we are adopted. In the Revelation chapter 20, it doesn't say that he gathers all of the sheep and then separates them. He says he gathers the goats and the sheep and then separates them. We've grown up in this cultural tradition that we're all God's children, and yet the scriptures never say that dichotomy exists. The third fill in the blank this morning, he lays down his life for the sheep. In John 10, he even said, the good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. And lastly, he will not lose his sheep. We read in John 6 and John 10 that all that the Father has given to me, number one, will come to me, and I will lose none of them. Then we fast forward to John chapter 10, that they are in my hand and no one can snatch them out. And they are in my Father's hand, who is greater than me, and no one can snatch them out of his hand. If we are his sheep, we are secure in him. I think David understood that when he wrote this. When he says, surely I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. He understood his security in the hand of his shepherd. And I would pray and hope that other believers find the peace and surety of knowing the shepherd. Of knowing that if we are his, that all of his promises are sure. All of Scripture will be fulfilled. That God has been 100% not only active, and I don't want to say successful, but he has a 100% track record with his prophecy. What he says he will do, and that he says that he will hold even his word above his very name.